Okay, here we go. As we all know, we've been online a lot in the last year. Our virtual world has merged with our real world, and it seems sometimes the virtual world is more prevalent these days. But as we're online more and more, we have to be informed and make sure that our personal information is secure because there's hackers out there, there's all types of trolls going on out there, people looking to steal our identities. So, our first speaker, I should say, our guest speaker today is Sateesh Chandrasekaran, who is a distinguished Toastmaster and a member of Beyond the Seas. And Satish's full-time career is in the field of information security, and he specializes in cybersecurity, and he's been instrumental in architecting security solutions for several Fortune 100 companies. He's an entrepreneur. He builds online businesses in the retail segment, and he has a business consulting practice to help individuals pursue their dream of building online businesses. Sateesh holds a MS in Management Information Systems, and he has an MS in Project Management. In addition to his academic education, he has several certificates in the field of information security. Now, Sateesh has been associated with Toastmasters since 2004, and he has held several different leadership positions, both in District 30 and in District 54. And since this world that we live in of web and virtual worlds colliding, digital identities have become a norm in today's world. So today, Sateesh will be presenting a presentation on your digital identity. Please put your hands together and help me welcome Sateesh Chandrasekaran.
Good morning,
Sateesh?
everyone. Everybody can hear me and everybody can see my screen, right? All right. I have posted a handout on the chat. Do not open it now. Wait for me to finish, and that's your takeaway when you get home. It was a Tuesday morning on December 1st, 2020. I vividly remember that date. Like many Zoom mates for the last 1 year, I've always been dressing for success for the top half because that's what the camera sees. So I got dressed, changed everything, rushed down to my office room, and logged into my work. The top mail on my mailbox was delivered from HR, and it read, "Please read and take action." Working for a Fortune 100 company, and in December, email from HR, what do you think? My heart was racing. It's very, very important at this time because with pandemic, there were so many changes in every organization, and mine was also the same. So I slowly, and I know for sure that it's not a spam because they have invested so much technology in reducing spam, unlike what we get in our Gmail accounts and so on and so forth. With trembling hands, I took the mouse and hovered over the email, and I, in a split second, opened it. The first line read, "Your unemployment claim has been reviewed. Can you confirm if you're employed or have been recently unemployed in order to process the unemployment benefit?" Ladies and gentlemen, I could feel the hot blood flow on my body, and I read the email not once, not twice, but 3 different times to make sure what was going on. And then I realized that somebody had stole my identity, and not only stole it, but also filed for an unemployment claim in the state of Illinois. That was a moment in my life to understand how important your digital identity in today's world. I'm going to cover a few topics today, and here is how the agenda is going to work. I have a disclaimer, like many professional speeches I give outside. Everything that you see in my presentation is purely the representation of what I think. I'm in no shape or form endorsing any company or anything like that. So that's my disclaimer. We are going to cover these topics today. I'm going to cover what is an identity, what is a digital identity. I'm going to cover the history because it's very, very important for you all to know where it started and where is it now and where is it going to go before you can take any action. Then I'm going to talk about the usage and creation and usage of digital identity. Then I'm going to talk about identity theft and how you can be prepared. And not only you, people that you know in your sphere of influence can be prepared if something like that happens on what I got on December 1st, 2020. And then I will give you some takeaways, which I've already posted in the chat that you should be able to download and reuse. Let's take a step back and talk about what identity is. The National Institute of Science and Technology, NIST in short.
I apologize, something in my chat. I'm very sorry, it's not a thing.
Um, so, the National Institute of Technology, in short, NIST, identifies your digital identity as an online persona of a subject, but it is also based on the situation and the context it was created. We cannot blankly say that every user ID and a password in every system is a digital identity because it is a part of a system. So that's you as an individual. When I log into my Facebook account, the profile that I have, right, in addition to my user ID and a password, it has got some personal information about who I am, where I live, and so on and so forth. That forms part of digital identity. Like, for example, in Gmail. Gmail alone is a component, but your overall digital footprint that you have in Google would be considered as a digital identity. And even it makes more concern when we in the world take the digital identity as also a legal identity in today's world. And I can give you some examples as we move on today. You see a nice cartoon that was published by Peter Steiner in the New Yorkers, and this was in the late 70s, early 80s. And he says, in the internet, nobody knows you are a dog. So the reason on your digital identity I want to cover the subject is, it is not only your image or your persona, but it's also your pseudo image, pseudonymous image or persona can also make up for your digital identity. Before we go too much into the digital identity, let's take a step back and look at what is identity. Because a lot of times we get confused. What is our identity? When you strip the word digital and identity, that's the explanation that you get in a Webster dictionary when you Google. Identity is the fact of being who or what a person or a thing is, the characteristic determining who and what the person or thing is. So it's not only you, but it's also who you are makes yourself an identity. Just for example, in my case, my first name, last name, plus my date of birth, plus my place of birth would have been my identity. So that's why in many South Indian names, you have a long name because they typically have their village name, their first name, their father's name, and then their ethnicity name. All those would make up a long name. And that's why we when we come to the United States, we cut some names or we just shrink them to what it is. So that's your identity. So let's talk about in the digital world. Like I said, it's who you are, it's what are you, and then it's your characteristics based on circumstances. Whether it's going to be a social media, whether it's going to be your work profile, whether it's going to be your digital persona that you use for multiple activities, is how it's going to be defined. Let's take a step back and look at the history of digital identities, how this all started. None of these came overnight. I just want to take the early computing a step away because years ago, in the early computing days, you just had a user ID and a password. In most cases, everybody shared it in the business or organization that you logged in and got your work done. And that identity was specific for the system as was never flowing down to other parts of the business. But the earliest digital identity footprint we can track back is the passport. I don't know how many of you remember Microsoft Passport in the early Hotmail days, the later Hotmail days to early days. So Microsoft had come up with this passport, and that was the first ever system, but that didn't make huge way. Then in the 2000, late 2000s, the 2010 timeframe, the second generation of online identity came. And here is where we talk about companies like social media, right? That's when Facebook started to become more prevalent. And people started to use their identity and create a digital persona of that individual as they move on to the digital world. That was more of a second generation. Later in the 2014, we are in the third generation where the identity lives now beyond my social media identities. So I'll give you some examples. For example, your autonomous car, right? People who own Tesla are so proud that they can open the phone, put the thumbprint, and then the car starts. So now it is not your digital identity in that box, but it is also being used by other systems. That's the 3.0, which we are in place today. And please be sure that this is going to go beyond social media. Think about the payment systems. Think about the last time that you actually dropped dollar bills through your computer to pay. It's digital transaction. How many of you buy in Amazon? Exactly. That's how digital identities are currently being used with 3.0. Let's have a reality check. I've given 3 questions. Please unmute your video and wave if you either use a social media, if you have ever done a financial transaction through PayPal or Zelle or any other mobile to mobile, or if you use Apple Pay, Android Pay. Welcome to the civilized world. Because now you have a digital footprint that is going to live or outlive your real world. This is the only slide I have, which is a little bit of a busy slide, because I wanted to spend a few minutes on this slide and try to explain how they are created. I'm not going to reread the tech target definition. You can actually read it, what it says about a digital identity is. In essence, it's our unique identifier that is organically developed using the personal information. And let me take the example of a Facebook. When I first created my Facebook account, like I said, you got to choose where you are. You got to choose some preferences. You got to choose your likes and dislikes, and then you build your community of friends. Many years ago, I read a book called Magic of Thinking Big. And there was a later illustration of the same book in the current world. And the author says that you can figure out your average income based on your friends. I am in IT. What would 80% of my friends would be? IT. And you know this is the figure for an IT. So that's my personal circle. So that is a contributing factor for my digital persona. So it's a unique identifier. User ID and passwords, we talked about it a lot. Your purchasing behavior. Think about it. When you think that you wanted to buy a crock pot, what ads do you see on Google? Crock pot ads. When you go to Amazon and you log in, what do you see first? Crock pot ads. Your purchasing behavior on history and your history also forms part of your digital image. Of course, your date of birth, which is unique to you, your SSN number. And we talked about this a lot, your online search activities. Every time you go to Google and search for something, then you get ads from Walmart or ads from Amazon or ads from any retailer, exactly what you're thinking. So when in those days when I was back in India, when I was working or growing up on school, they said that you can never read others' mind. Thanks to AI, it can read your mind and create your digital identity. I want to move on and kind of talk to you all about how it's being used. There was a research article that was published in the late 90s by Professor Hal Albertson. And at that time, what he predicted was your digital identity is a valuable commodity. It might not be too much of worth for you as an individual, but from a business perspective, it's a very valuable commodity. And he predicted almost 20 years ago that your target marketing and your behavior analysis tools would be based on digital identities. And I gave you an example and about the crockpot. But in this research paper, he talks about a research that was done using Ford Mustang. He gives an example. So a dealer can look at people who buy Ford Mustang. They may not know why you bought a Ford Mustang. They may not actually know your financial position exactly, but they know Sateesh bought Ford Mustang. And they also saw SK buying Ford Mustang. And they also saw Josna buying Ford Mustang. The reason I'm picking these three people are, they are all in the same IT field. So now if I'm a dealer, I know that an Indian descendant, Ford Mustang, IT, now I can target that community. So it's an example. And I hope SK doesn't go buy a Ford Mustang tomorrow, but it's an example. And that's what he predicted 20 years ago that would happen. And we have seen that in today's world. And last but not the least, please remember your digital identity is nothing but your proxy to the world. Now that I have drilled enough about the digital identity and how they are created and so on and so forth, let's talk about who steals it and for what purpose. Because as an individual, it might not be a huge value for you today, but for someone else, it's a high value target. And who would typically do it? And I've given you some examples. And I'll try and give you some stories also along with those examples. Right? Programmers are usually the people who write computer programs that have the ability to attack your systems. And that's one of the set of people who are usually the people who steal digital identities. There is another category called carders or carding. And this has been very sophisticated. I spent about the last 3 years as a PCI QSA, which it stands for Payment Card Industry Qualified Security Assessor. So I would go and assess organizations, and I have to sign an auditing report that their card security is very strong, because that was a market that people steal digital identities. So carding or carders are somebody who will steal your credit card or debit card information. So once they have your credit card or debit card information and they know your identity, they can now create a pseudonymous identity on behalf of you and do bad things. Criminal hackers. That's the name is very clear, right? They are people who sole business is to hack and create income. And these are black hat hackers. Uh, there have been several in the last 15 years, and you would have heard about, I'm not sure if you guys have heard about Coors that got hacked. Uh, the school department, like how we have the District 204 in our Aurora area, the school board of Boston got, not Boston, Buffalo got hacked. So there are so many things, but there's one character. It's very interesting, in my opinion, is that happened in the late 2000, maybe 2008, 2009 timeframe, and till today there is no real name for that person. So he goes by the word Astra, and Astra in Sanskrit means weapon. And what Astra does is, for 10 years, he has been consistently creating hacks on the Dassault group and stole close to about $360 million worth of weapon and sold it. They have actually not released his real name. He's supposed to be a late 50s Greek mathematician, but there is no data about him. There is no tracks about him. But that's exactly what he has been doing, is stealing from corporates using digital identities. The last one is a social engineer. And this is what I'm going to spend a little bit more time, because this directly impacts you as an individual. In general, what does the social engineers do? They develop scams and phishing emails to impersonate others, or trick you into doing something. And I'm going to take, there are several examples of social engineering attacks, but I'm going to take 4, and I'm going to tell you and show you in the recent times how my identity has been used. So to give you an idea. The first one I wanted to talk about, phishing. Phishing is an email or a phone call that you will receive, and most of the time it'll be urgency. Just to give you a background, a few weeks ago, city of Aurora has opened up what's called as the mass vaccination sites, and they've been doing it religiously. I do really appreciate the city, because on a week, as an average, about 2,000 to 2,500 people are getting vaccinated through this camp. Sateesh goes and registers for the camp. And I got 2 emails. Within the first 48 hours, I take my vaccine last Saturday. I took a Johnson & Johnson 1 shot. And if anybody is taking it, please go ahead and do it. I'm still alive and awake for a week now. So that being said, after I shot, I came back home. On Monday, I get a COVID vaccine survey email. That's not from City of Aurora. That's a spam. How do you know it's a spam? You will find the urgency. Click here to get it done. Do this. It will always be an urge. And I also got a text message on my phone from Amazon about some gift, because I had taken up a vaccine. Think about it. I'm in Aurora, got a vaccine from the mass vaccine, come back in 48 hours, you get this. So this is an example of a phishing. And I'm sure the companies that you work have spent tons and tons of dollars in educating you what you should click on, what you shouldn't click, but please follow their advice. The next one I want to talk about is pretexting. Pretexting will focus on a fabricated scenario most of the time. They will always come up with a credible story. So, for example, how many of you have gotten a call saying that your social security warning, we have a warrant against you, and this will be a robotic message. And I exactly know it because they would kill my last name to its core. When they can't spell Chandrasekaran or they have not taken an effort to spell, it's a robotic call. Two more examples as we move on. Baiting. And I have an example there. This happened right about 2-3 weeks ago. My wife has been in process of spring decluttering. We were trying to sell a few things. My son outgrew his furniture and so on and so forth, and he's now 6'4". So we got to start selling it. And she puts it on Facebook Marketplace and eBay. She gets a text message. And always baiting will try to give you more than what you ask for. So the baiter had messaged my wife and said, if the product is X, I will give you X plus Y, hold it for me, and I will come and pick it up. And I will use a Zilli or some online type payment as you move on. So that's an example of a bait. It will be always a promise to entice a victim. The last one is the quid pro quo, which is similar to a bait, but this comes with a story. So for example, you might get a call from Social Security Administration and say, oh, by the way, our computer is at fault. Can you give me your SSN number? Or I'm calling from JPMC Chase. We are having some backend system problem. Can you ensure that you have your online user ID in the account? So they know a story about you, like pretexting, but they will also come up with another sophisticated attack to take your information. The last one I wanted to cover on the digital identity stealing is money mules. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie called The Mule. Has anybody seen the recently that came? Yes. So that's where he brings money from the drug trafficking people, right? Typically, that's how they work. These are called money mules. And this is very sophisticated. What they would try to do is they will steal money from outside, and you might get an email or a phone call to say that I'm going to wire transfer you money of $1,000. You keep $300, but take the $700 and deposit in this account, or take or buy gift cards and send it to this address, and so on and so forth. So you end up doing it, but the actual money never comes in from outside, or even if it comes, it becomes a fake check or a fake transfer. And through the wiring transaction, they can also wipe out your account. And you will find there is a website I've put there. Don't worry about writing it down. It's there in your handout. You go read the sad stories of people whose digital identities were stolen using money mules. So you be very, very careful as you move on. I've been speaking for almost 30 minutes, and let's do a reality check. Read the three things, and hopefully don't wave your hand for the third one. Have you ever received a spam or an email? Have you been trained at the place of employment for? And please don't wait for the third one, okay? Hopefully everybody's paying attention and not playing Candy Crush on your phone. Remember, the cartoon says, right? You never know what's happening on the other side of the web. So we are almost to the last section. I know you've been patient enough to understand and bear with me. So this is an approach that I have taken. And I want to read a disclaimer on this one. So the National Institute of Science and Technology has developed this framework called the cybersecurity framework. And what you see on the screen, the identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover, and so on and so forth, are part of the NIST framework. And the NIST framework is typically used by Fortune 50, 100 companies, and so on and so forth. And at the place of employment, I'm the subject matter expert for recover. So after an incident, if something happens to you or your organization, I would come and help you with the recovery phase. So this is a framework. And my disclaimer is, I have made an attempt to take that framework and make it work for me as an individual. There is no published writing about it, about making it personal for your personal use, but I've just taken a step. So you can use the concepts, even though this is mainly for organizations, it's not for an individual, but you can take the concept and build your own plan. And I've made an attempt to do it. About the cybersecurity framework, like I said, it's the NIST framework of identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover. For each of the 5 stages, I'm going to give you some examples and what I did to protect my identity. And remember, we talked about the incident that happened on the 1st of December when I got the email about unemployment. And I'm going to walk you through what I did in December. And as I was trying to work on my other businesses, this idea of taking the concept from NIST made more sense. And I've just tried to create it on my own. The first one is to identify. You got to take an inventory of all your digital footprint, your bank accounts. And please don't delete your Facebook, because we are in the age that you will have to start using these technologies, right? So you cannot, when I go for assessment, a lot of the times the CEO would ask, what is the best way I can secure my system? I said, turn off all the computers, buy a typewriter, and ask a typist to type. That's the only secure way you can be. But is that even possible today? No. So you have to make protection as we move forward. And with this COVID, most of the organizations are working from home. And think about it. Do you think your employer would bring you back to office and waste time and money on their cube? My office is no longer there. They have all gone into what's called as a dim light concept. So you're going to be working from home ever for the most businesses. I'm not generalizing about everyone. Anyway, take an inventory of your identity, online accounts, and everything, so you know what is there to protect. The second activity that I did, or I always keep doing, is making sure my credit monitoring agencies are frozen and locked. You can do it too. You don't have to wait for your identity to be lost to do it. I have given the numbers. Don't worry about writing it down. It's there in your handout. You can notify the 3 credit bureaus. You can actually log in to the credit bureau and you can place a freeze. But remember, if you do it, make sure you unfreeze it before you look for any new home or any new automobile, because nobody will be able to run credit report on your account. You're primarily closing the credit. You're not actually closing the credit, but you're putting a freeze so that nobody can run a credit check against you. And if you're going to buy a car, they can't run a credit check, they will never approve you for the loan. So you open it, I would say a month before you do it, and then you can close it after the entry, whatever your transaction. By doing that, nobody can run a credit and open a credit account on your name. So it will help you to protect it for the most part. Detection. The third step is to detect. And remember, the identify, detect, protect, respond, and recover are not sequential. You don't identify, then you don't go protect, then you don't go detect. So it's a cyclic order. You got to do everything at the same time. It's only 5 steps, but you got to keep doing it and maturing it over a period of time. After the December event, I invested in a identity protection company, and I personally use Xander. You can use whomever you like, or whatever you feel like. But I just want to give you an example how the detect actually worked. Remember I told you about the Aurora mass vaccination? So I had to go to the city of Aurora and I have to type my email and I have to type my phone number. And I got a text message from MaxVax Aurora that the registration confirmation is done. Within 15 minutes, I get an email from Xander saying that your phone number is now being used by another party. In this case, I'm okay because I know I registered for MaxVax. I got the SMS from MaxVax, and I also got an email in about 10 minutes from Xander saying that somebody was using my cell phone. I'm okay. But imagine if I had never registered for MaxVax and I got that email. Now it makes me to think, oh, what could be the reason? It could be a false positive, but that's okay. It's better to know than not knowing what was happening. So detection is always a timely discovery of an incident. Right? You cannot wait for the house to get stolen and wait 4 days to give a police complaint. So you have to detect it and take immediate action, or have some sort of a solution for that. The last 2 sections are the respond and the recover. After I got that email on December 1st about the potential unemployment, I went to FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and there is a place where you can go and click on my identity is stolen, or I believe my identity is stolen, one of those things. Go click on it, you create an account, and it asks you for all the information, and your HR, my HR was able to give me what are all the things that they had. So we were able to go through the whole scenario. And then you have to file a local police complaint. City of Aurora was very helpful in that one. I called the City of Aurora Police Department. Since it was not an emergency, they said, in today, a visiting officer in your area will come and look at it. An officer came, I explained to him. Pretty much we filed a complaint. There's nothing you can do, but at least you are filing a complaint. And then you will finally, if you live in state of Illinois, which everybody is here, you go to that IDES, illinois.gov pages, and then you fill out a form and be very patient. It took 14 days for me to get an acknowledgement that they got what I had to tell them. Right, it is Illinois state, but they will charge you 5.5% tax. But that's okay. So recovery is the last step. In case if your identity gets stolen, do this in FTC. And the moment you go do it in FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, they will provide you a checklist based on the state you are, and you just follow it, and it's going to be very, very simple and very straightforward. I know we talked a lot, and I'm sure this would be really helpful for you as we move on. But I wanted to conclude with a few things. Remember, the digital identity will continue to evolve. When we talk about the history, we talked about the version 1, version 2 passport, and version 2 identity, and then the identity version 3. And I gave you some examples of Tesla starting and so on and so forth. But think about it. Most homes are now digitally connected. Like, for example, in my house, I have a Ring system that's connected to my personal information. I have a Ecobee thermostat that senses and adjusts the temperature in the house. You have CCTV cameras, right? You have to call Alexa or Siri if you need something. All these are going to be evolving and you will use it more and more. So the more you use it, the more theft will happen. And to protect it, I took an example of the NIST CSF framework just to refresh you. The identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Those would be the 5 stages. And the handouts that I gave you has got the 5 stages. Just make your own plan. Don't overcomplicate it. Spend about an hour on a Sunday evening, look through, create your own plan. Few more things I wanted to tell on the devices that you use, because remember, your digital identity is served through a device that you have, whether it's your phone, your laptop, or your connected devices, and so on and so forth. Make sure you install some security software on your systems, whether it's your mobile phone or your computer, and so on and so forth. And make sure, and please understand, just because you have it, it's not going to work always. Like your vaccine, just because I had a flu shot doesn't mean that I will never get to get flu, but the chances would be less. The same way, the software that is on your machine is always reactive. It's never going to be proactive, but at least you have something in place. Second thing is read and understand the privacy policies on all your social media sites. And now they're becoming more and more transparent. You can go to Facebook, you can adjust your settings, you can go to WhatsApp, you can adjust your settings. Sometimes it's so funny, right? People switch from WhatsApp to Telegram, and tomorrow what? They're going to switch from that to that. You can't keep changing. You got to live with what it is. Otherwise, never, you cannot stop using certain things. But don't be over paranoid and stay away from technology. It's not going to help us. So, but understand what the privacy settings are. And also try to restrict the posts that you put on social media. So I have a rule in my house. If our whole family is traveling, we do not open or put anything on social media. And I'll give you an example. This happened several years ago. Must have been in the early 2000s when we used to live in Bloomington, Illinois. Uh, most Indians stay in an apartment in one particular community. When you enter the house, when you enter the community, you can just smell sambar and that's it. That's an Indian community building. And this guy left an elaborate voicemail. Not a voicemail. Those days you used to have an answering machine. It was an elaborate answering machine. I am so and so. My family and I are excited to go to India. We are not going to be at home from this day to this date. Blah 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 blah. Don't leave a message because I will not have access. He just gave his whole story. And when he came back, there was nothing in the house. They took even the TV. That became a big story in our community, and we started to post it everywhere and never say. It's the same thing in your social media. Why do you have to tell the whole world you're having fun time in Wisconsin Dells as a family when you know that if somebody knows your whole family is there, how long will it take for them to come and wipe your house out? So that's a rule that we have in our household, that we will never post. After you come back, we can post, but not when all the three of us are not in our house. So that's another precaution that you can do. The last line before I close. Remember, everything that you post online is there forever and ever and ever. There is no mass delete. There is nothing you can do. There could be backups after backups after backups, and it's going to be there forever. It was great talking to you on a Saturday morning. I hope today's information was good and you will take action to protect your digital identity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sateesh. Thank you for that riveting presentation. If you just give me a second here, I'm responding to this email There's a prince that wants to give me 10% of his wealth. He has like $360 million. So I definitely can use 36 million. Just give me 1 second to send him my information here and send. Yeah, I'm all good. Not. Let's give Sateesh a hand for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Timer, do we have a few minutes to take a break?
Yes, I
5 minute
thought
break.
that was going to be a question and answer because I've got some questions.
Yeah,
You
please go
are
ahead.
you are correct. Q&A.
There's some Q&A, and we've got time for Q&A. And
Okay.
I've got some questions, Sateesh.
Yep.
I actually got a letter, believe it or not, yesterday that someone has filed unemployment under my name. This is the second time this has happened to me. The first time was in Illinois. This time I'm in Kentucky. So I thought I had everything taken care of, but when you get something from out of state, and I immediately tried calling the office that the letter came from to tell them that this was fraudulent. And I mean, they actually have the last 4 digits of my social security number. I'm so upset. I tried to call them and couldn't get through. So they have an email address, a website, and they wanted me to go on to this website. And then they tell you that there's a chat that can help you. Well, I kept putting in there fraud. How do I get help? What's going on? Can you stop this? What are other steps that I can take since this is out of state? This is not a state that I've ever lived in. I've never lived in Kentucky, never wanted to live in Kentucky. So what are the next steps for me to take?
And Sonia, what you can do first is go to that FTC website I sent to you, and you file a complaint with Federal Trade Commission. And once you're done with FTC, there is an option to show, they will ask you which are all the states that you believe it's being impacted. In my case, it was only Illinois. But if it is other state, they will give you relevant information. Calling is not going to work out because nobody's going to pick up the phone. And even the 800 number I have for Illinois, it's of no use. So you got to go online. That's the only option to go do. But if you go to FTC, the FTC will give you, because how do we know that the letter that you got is real? But if you go to FTC, and they will have the Kentucky, whichever department, and then you can cross-verify to make sure that it's real before you go do open any chat.
I will do that. And are they open on Saturdays?
Only KFC is open on Saturdays. I'm not sure about them.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions for Sateesh?
I have one. This is Josna.
$10 a question, okay? I'm just kidding. Right.
Satish, in terms of the passwords, right? Every website we need a user ID and password these days, and for me, it's a struggle because I've got multiple times that your password is compromised. Suppose LinkedIn had a data breach, and I use a common password and add something, either prefix or suffix in the end because it's easy to remember. But I keep getting these things once in a while that the password is compromised. So my question to you is, do you suggest using like a LastPass or something? Because I always have this feeling like if I just go with something like that, what if that gets data breach? Then so what is your recommendation?
So my suggestion would be, my son uses that tool. He has got LastPass because he has got so much. He's always on social media. He uses LastPass, and LastPass is a very good product because what happens is most of them use an algorithm, which is difficult to break. Well, at least in today's world, but that's a great option. I personally don't have LastPass, but I was always debating whether to use it or not. But a password management system is a better choice to go through. And also, when you have your iPhone or Android phone, I'm sorry, at least on an iPhone, you have the capability to have a vault or keychain that you can store with Apple, and it's more secure that way to do. This is what happens with most people. When they say a 8-character uppercase, lowercase, and a special character, most of them will have one on the first or the end, which is common, and most of them will have an uppercase on the first letter or at the end, which is common. So if you break that methodology and put something in between, that would help. The third suggestion I can give you is try to use a phrase. And I have a pattern. I don't use the same password for all my bank accounts, but I have a pattern. And the pattern, I'm the only one who knows the pattern. And that pattern has got different parameters for different accounts. So for my Barclays would be different from my Chase, would be different from something else, would be different from something else. But all the banks, but I know my pattern. The pattern will be something that I I can understand, but I would have changed certain parameters in between, which is a variable for each of those banks. So you can go that way. But for making life easier, if you have a keychain or something on your Apple, that's a good way to go, or LastPass is a good way to go.
Sateesh, I got a question for you. My parents received some emails, and this is going way back. I noticed that they had received emails from as far back as 2016. These emails were around Amazon. Your order has been placed, blah, blah, blah. What I told my parents is you take your cursor and you hover above that Amazon email and the person that sent it to you. If it does not have an @ symbol followed by Amazon.com, it's probably more than likely fraudulent, correct?
That is right. That's one thing. And second thing is the spelling mistakes. So remember how many of us would have typed Google when you type it fast, K and L is next to each other. And you go and search Google, don't do it from your home computer, but it used to be a pornographic site before. Because when you type Google, Google, and L and K are next to each other, and those while ago that was a hacking site.
Okay.
So you also have to look for spelling mistakes, because I cannot go create a domain name called Amazon anymore. It used to happen many years ago, but then the regulation, the INR, and all those people made a regulation such way that only corporations can have a fully qualified domain name. So I cannot create an Amazon.com and put a DNS request or a domain name request on the internet, because it's going to shoot down from the top level domains.
Okay.
So, but I can create AMA instead of ZO, I can do XO. But when you look at it from your eyes, it's because most people don't read all the letters. I can flip a letter here and there too. So it might look like Amazon, but it would be AMA XON.
Well, what I did once I kind of started investigating their email accounts, I actually set them up on LifeLock to get them the protection that they need, because they're older. They don't do a whole lot of purchases using Amazon. My dad might purchase some hunting items or something like that, but he doesn't use Amazon like that frequently. And my mom definitely doesn't do it. My mom is still a box store person. I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive and go get what I need. I'm not putting credit card information out there, but I told her that at some point in time, your identity was stolen and people are making these purchases, and they're not small purchases. They're big screen TVs, they're laptops, they're major car systems, $1,500 items. And there was probably several of these messages that came through just using their identification. So hopefully LifeLock is, is going to protect them, because they got the premium package for protection.
Yeah, and in all honesty, right, it's going to be like insurance. So you will have to take it. You may not use it, but there's no other choice, right? You got to
Right.
have some sort of a protection. And like I said, right, as years go by, we're going to be relying more and more on these online systems, and it is what
Okay.
it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I will say this, if I may. I worked in school districts and I was the director of technology. And we had a staff of over 300 to 400 people. And a majority of them, I would say 75% of them, because we did a survey, 75% of them never changed the generic password that they were given. And we were astonished because it had been years. And even the woman who was the assistant superintendent that moved into the superintendent role was still using the generic password she was given 25 years before that. So you're looking at this, and people don't understand that they have to change their passwords. I'm glad that we did finally get a standard, but when you change your password, and I'm going to say this to Josna, I use a spreadsheet, and I put mine on a spreadsheet so that it is not available to anyone other than myself on a flash drive. And as Sateesh mentioned about keychain and stuff, I still have issues about cloud storage, etc. But do it on a spreadsheet and make sure that you keep track of what account does what. And then you want to make changes to those passwords. Change them every 90 days or change them once a year, something, so that can sort of protect your passwords, I would think.
Yeah,
As a
and yeah, psychologically, right? Human psychology. How many of you have changed your house lock every 90 days? Nobody, because we don't change keys, right? You keep the same key for the last 20 years in the same house. The same mentality, right? Because that's how we are a path of least resistance. So it's going to be torture for my office too, right? Every 90 days, you got to keep changing it, you got to keep changing, and all people do is just flip a number at the end, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and make it easy. So there's a big debate. There was, and I'll wrap up with this one. There was an architectural debate that went on a research paper several years ago. Should we really make people change passwords, or should we have them not change too many times? Because by changing it too frequently, you are making it even more weaker. All you're going to do is add 1, 2, 3, 4 for the next 12 months and be done. But instead, if you don't make them change too often, but keep it very strong and short, the possibility of it being stolen is a lot less. So you got to decide on which way is the best way to do so.
Satish, I have one more question, if that's okay.
Okay.
And Sonia, is that okay? Okay. I got I generally go through my transactions, and we saw an electronic transaction the other day. It's a check electronically processed, not from us, but it is from, as if it looked like, it is from us, and somebody debited some amount from our bank account. So when we call the bank said there is no way that they can trace who did that. The only way they can protect is if we go ahead and close that bank account and open a new one. So it seems like we give checks to so many people, and the bank account is on the check. So somebody could just take that account and really do an electronic transaction on your behalf and can take money out of your bank account. It appeared like that. But
Yeah. So just now on the presentation, I talked about money mules.
yeah.
That's how it is done. So
Mm.
when I can give you a check and you deposit the check, then I can know your routing number on your bank account. And for ACH, and this is another story, then I'll wrap up with this one. what I find difference between, because I do have accounts in India and here. So typically in India, there are three types of transfers. That is called NEFT, RGTST, and another way to do it. All these three require a third-party verification. So every time a transfer happens, you will get a text message and you have to authenticate it offline before the transfer happens. And I don't know in the US, why can't banks do it? We don't do it. I can do an ACH transfer from Ansonia and wipe her bank account tomorrow morning. I'm good. Because there is no way for Ansonia to re-authenticate it. And I don't know why we don't do it. There are so many things in the US can be done in the banking sector that we do not do, which rest of the world is doing it. So it's possible. That's one of the way money mules will steal. I know we're up against the time. If you need something, you can always ask me in private. I'm always there, and feel free to use the resources that was provided.
Okay, thank you, Sateesh.